Behind every successful endeavor in life is a relationship built on trust. Welcome to The Trust Doctor, restoring trust and enriching significant relationships. A podcast focused on helping you nurture healthy relationships. Join thought leader and world-renowned expert on relationship and empowerment coaching, Dr. Patty Ann, and her special guests every week for insightful and meaningful conversations filled with great takeaways that will help you build healthier business partnerships and happier romantic relationships. Are you ready to restore trust and enrich the significant relationships in your life? The Trust Doctor, Dr. Patty Ann, is in.
Welcome to today's podcast episode of The Trust Doctor, Restoring Trust and Enriching Significant Relationships. And since I know you are going to love this interview, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Today, I have an incredible man. As I was learning about him, honestly, I cannot get enough of this guy. Yes, he has the same first name as my husband, but that's not the only reason why I adore him. He is a rebel rouser, a disruptor, and he's the kind of guy, he's the reason why we're not taking a horse to work anymore, because he creates a vision and he makes it come to life. And of course, that means he's not your regular cat. He's cut from a different cloth. So I'll give you a little bit of information about this guest, and then I will let him share with you all his pearls of wisdom from what he's learned and what he didn't learn so well. All right. So Mitch Lowe was one of the co-founders of none other than Netflix. If I have to tell you what Netflix is, you need to crawl out from under your rock. He was also involved with Redbox and McDonald's Corp. And most recently, he was the CEO of MoviePass. But before I go on, why don't I just make sure that you buckle up, because Mitch Lowe is about to take us for a ride. Welcome, Mitch, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much. I'm really thrilled to be here.
Great. So as I told you a little bit before we got started, but I like to be a little bit unconventional. So I'm not going to ask you how you got here and to give me the history of your career. This is what I would love to know, and I think our listeners would love to know. You're known as the guy that says, I'll figure it out.
Right.
Help us understand how that defined your success and maybe not such great successes in business, and run with it wherever you want to go. Because I just love that, right? Because people say to me, how are you going to do it? I'm like, I have no idea, but I'll figure it out.
Well, it actually defines the things that have gone well for me and the things that haven't gone well. And when I look back and think about this aspect of my life and how I approach things, unfortunately, I don't ever do a pros and cons. When people tell me, what do you think? Do you think we can do this? And I remember Mark Randolph and Reed asked me, do you think we could mail DVDs with the US Post Office? And
just in case the listeners had had a brain fart, mm-hmm. Reed and Mark were the other co-founders of Netflix.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
And really, it was Mark's idea, to figure out how you could build a business using the U.S. Post Office that eventually would become a streaming giant. And of course, in those days, no one knew whether it would be streaming or downloading. But I just say, as an example, people ask me, could you do this? And in this case, Mark, was curious, could you mail a DVD using the US Post Office and it actually survive? And without thinking about it, I was kind of thinking about what the end goal would be, and that's successfully mail, a movie using, a first class postage stamp. And my answer was, of course. Of course it can, it works with no knowledge at all about how it, in fact, none of us knew at the time that first class postage in the US goes over a metal roller about 8 inches in diameter and bends the mail around it. And so, it's just.
So wait, so how did you figure that out?
Well, ultimately, what ended up happening is we went to the studios and the manufacturers of the disc, because after experiments, and in fact, one of the coolest rooms in the early days of Netflix was this room with all these, we made these rollers to look just like the post office after we found out this is what happened. And we would put a DVD over the top in an envelope and tie it down with weights to show what would happen when it bent. And they almost all snapped in half. They broke. And over some experiments, we found the ones without the title on the one side that said the name of the movie and the studio and so on, we found the ones without that did not break. And so in the end, the solution was going to the studios and saying, for the DVDs you give to Netflix, don't put the title of the movie, don't do that silk screen that you do on typical DVDs to say the title and so on. Just do a tiny etch on the hub.
So you were just mentioning about, you found that if there was not a completely smooth surface, they would survive the metal bend.
Yes.
That's all you needed to do.
Yeah, it's almost every problem has a solution. And in fact, I've kind of come to the conclusion that it's better not to evaluate the pros and cons of, can you do this? Can you do that?
So all the engineers in the audience are just cringing.
Well, no, the engineers are part of the solution. Every one of these challenges or repurposing of a product that's made to put in a DVD player. And in this example, it's just, okay, how do we make that work in another environment, like, shipping through the mail in a flimsy envelope? But it's true about, I believe it's true about all these ideas that entrepreneurs have about starting a new business, especially those based on solving a personal problem. Mm-hmm. We all know the story of Travis Kalanick sitting in the Paris suburbs, and he couldn't get a taxi, and he thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could just pull out my phone and a car would show up? And all these businesses that have that personal connection with solving something you face all have hundreds of problems, hundreds of obstacles. And it's
you can't do something.
Yeah, like, hey, you can't do that. But that's such a disempowering thought. And the way to approach it is just, you know what? I don't know the answer, but I'm going to figure it out. And that's what stimulates me. That's the thing that gets me up in the morning, is how in the world are we going to figure this out? And
that's why people want to surround themselves with you, right? And it's interesting because some of the companies I coach and consult with, 2 in particular I'm thinking of, I told them I'm going to ban the title of your colleague Mark's book. That will never work here, because that is, because if you say that, you will be out of business in 2 to 3 years. It is the kiss of death for innovation, for brainstorming. And it's a limitation we put on our own ability. So I don't know much about your background. So where did that can-do attitude come from, right? Like you mentioned Uber, love them or hate them. Elon Musk is the kind of guy. And I also believe we can solve any problem. We just haven't solved it yet.
Yeah.
But you can't focus on what doesn't work. Clean slate. Okay. what
Mhm.
does work, which is why sometimes when you bring people into a company that's struggling from out of the industry, they don't have all the preconceived notions of how we always do things,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But where
Exactly.
did that unlimited belief come from, that grit, that determination? Because there's plenty of entrepreneurs listening to this that want a piece of that desperately.
Mhm. I think it comes from a couple areas. One is my mother, really instilled self-confidence in me, and always gave me positive feedback with whatever I wanted to do.
Give an example of that. How did she do that?
Well, there was one point where I became kind of an avid reader of a magazine called Scientific American.
Sure.
And
Is that
I
still
was
around?
in,
Yeah, that's still around, right?
is it? It was
Who
just
knows?
so inspiring. I was in third grade, and I wanted to create a laboratory in my room. So I wanted to build a desk and have a sink in it, and these trays for chemicals. And I don't know how other mothers are, but she said, "Yep, let's go to the lumber yard. Let's go buy some stuff. I'll get you a hammer and nails and a saw, and you can put it together, and then we'll go, to a chemical supply place." And she was just always really supportive of, one time I wanted, halfway through the summer after my junior year in high school, I wanted to hitchhike to Canada with a friend. And she said, "Sure, here's $40. Go for it." And so she was always, later on, I wanted to leave high school halfway through my senior year. And instead of saying, "No, you need to finish school," she introduced me to a guy who had a poster company, a blacklight poster company. This is 1969. And this guy gave me a job as his European salesman, gave me a roll of posters, and my mom bought me a one-way Icelandic Airway ticket to Europe. And she was just always supportive. She always...
I have to say, I would have drawn the line at dropping out of high school. I absolutely would have. But what you're saying is what she did was any imagination that was sparked within you, she fueled.
Yeah. She supported, wholeheartedly. And, I mean, the decisions may not have always been the right ones, and the risks were pretty crazy, but I think it gave me that confidence that there was no limitations.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. All right, so tell us who you found, all right, you know what, people want to probably hear this. Give us the Reader's Digest version of your career, but then we'll get to the more interesting stuff like the relationships there.
Sure. So, my career is, 50 years long.
Right, because you started out.
Right. I started out as a poster salesman in Europe. I was 16, 17 years old. Just was lucky to be at the right place at the right time, made a ton of money.
Oh, wait, was that the smuggling goods and money in Europe? I know you did.
That's after.
Oh, okay. That's the juicy part.
Yeah. So unfortunately, the poster business didn't last long, because one of the most popular posters was all the Disney characters in lewd positions. The seven dwarfs under Snow White's dress. You just saw their little feet out underneath. And so the company got sued and went out of business.
All right, we just got rated. Do they do rated X anymore? I don't know.
Yes, and NC-17 and the like. This would have been NC-17.
Oh yeah, you might know a thing or two about movies. Yeah, I got the right guy.
That's true. So then I had to look for something to do, and not being a high school graduate or having a college degree, you're kind of limited. Mm-hmm. And so I had been to Romania, kind of just traveling across Europe and going towards Istanbul. And I had seen these kind of beautiful folk costumes that the women wore there, all hand embroidered. They were typically made for their dowry, and they were silk and just beautiful. And so at the same time, this is while it was behind the Iron Curtain, there was this kind of arbitrary pricing for money in the country, an official exchange rate. And I learned that you could buy Romanian money, in fact, all Eastern European monies, in banks in Geneva and in Vienna at like 1/100th of the cost of in the country. So I thought, I don't know where this idea came from, but I thought, I know how I can make money. I will buy this money in Geneva or Vienna. I'll sneak it into the country and I'll use it to buy things like these embroidered blouses, then take them back to the US and sell them. And so I started doing that, and I brought them back, sold them on Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills. Blouses I paid $3 or $4 for, I would sell for $300 or $400. And I just
kind of still works that way.
Yeah. And what was amazing is I saw this ecosystem that I could put together, which ultimately I did 18 times, where I would buy an old Mercedes in Germany. I would drive across Europe, first to Vienna, buy money, go to Romania, buy all these things, then go to Greece and ship everything back to the US. Then I would keep driving all the way across Turkey to Damascus and sell the car to taxi cab companies, make a profit there, then fly to Egypt and buy these awnings that they would make for me for restaurants in Sausalito and, all over the San Francisco Bay Area, and then go home and sell the stuff and do it all over again. And it was just, I learned about
the silk. What was it? The silk trade to shame.
Yeah, right. It was just being opportunistic with, some ability to buy cool things and sell them at a higher price.
You just said something interesting. And honestly, I don't remember if we said this live or if we were speaking beforehand, but you said that not having finished high school or going to college, you had limited choices. And when you said that, I thought to myself, well, in the corporate world, but in the entrepreneurial world, it served, my hunch is it served you well even here, because you didn't know that something wasn't supposed to work. You didn't know that you weren't supposed to do it that way.
That's right. Yeah, I learned over time, but yeah, in the beginning it was like, rules? What rules? I had no idea, but essentially I did that. And then eventually I came back to the US right when the kind of video rental industry got going in the early 80s in 1980.
And that was Blockbuster, correct?
Well, Blockbuster started years later. What I did was I just became a customer of a local video store. There was to show you how far back it is, there was 4 video stores in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time. Eventually there was thousands, but I became a customer and was spending so much money because I growing up as a latchkey kid, my parents worked till 6 or 7.
Excuse me, Mitch, did you grow up in the Bay Area?
I was born in Omaha, but I ended up living in almost 6 or 7 places in California. My father was an aeronautic engineer, and we kept moving from place to place. San Diego, Sacramento, 3 or 4 places in the Bay Area. And then my parents got divorced, and I ended up going to 13 different schools between kindergarten and my senior year of high school. So
because your mom moved, or you got thrown out?
We moved, and then after she got divorced, I had 3 different stepfathers. So it was kind of constantly moving.
Mhm.
But that also had a lot of impact on how I look at things. I had to, not having friends, having to make new friends every time.
Pre-Facebook.
Yeah.
For the young people listening, pre-Facebook, right?
Pre-Facebook. It's, you become more adept at not only being alone, but also more adept at making friends. So anyway, so then I got, after becoming a customer of this video store, I realized that they were really doing things wrong. And so I thought, I'm going to create a video.
How old are you about now, Mitch, at this stage?
This was, I was 30. I was like 30.
Okay, so not really a kid anymore. A kid for us today, but not really.
Right. I wish I could go back. But so I was, every business or every process I would see, in my mind, I would think, God, that is really clunky. Like, why do you do it that way? And in this case, they were, this is pre-computers. So, they were doing triplicate paper receipts, to rent movies.
The carbon copy.
Yeah, carbon copies.
Black.
And, one inside the cassette, one attached by a paper clip to the member card, and then one in the data receipt. It was just seemed ridiculous and tedious. So I was always looking for ways to improve it. And one of the ways was to develop a vending machine that could rent VHS cassettes. And so that's how I really got going. I started a company called Video Droid.
And you thought that was your baby, that was your brain.
Yeah. I thought, you take the internal and external theft out of it. You have an inventory system. Everything is done with a credit card. It just made so much sense. But customer, and I built a couple machines in partnership with a Japanese company that I found, and it just failed miserably. I mean, people would look at the machine and go, why in the world would I use that kiosk? There's a video store on every corner now. What's the
they went to the kiosk to get a bag of M&Ms or candy, and there's videos there.
Right, but videos, no. And so what I learned in that is I became a pretty good retailer. I began to learn customer service and merchandising, and so I turned the place where we were developing this product into a video store. And I just it almost felt like retail was in my blood. And my grandfather was a shoe salesman in Omaha. And I just started feeling like, I really love this space of talking to customers, showing them all the new movies, laying out the store, doing the accounting. All that just became just a wonderful thing. I just loved it. And so I started doing that. And for the next 15 years, I opened video stores with my brother. We had 10 stores. I would spend, on average 10, 12 hours a day in the store, in one of the stores or another. And but in the night, and I joined the trade association. So I became, went on the board, became president of the trade association, and just started getting exposed to people, with a lot more education, running big companies like Blockbuster, like Hollywood Video, who are on the board with me. So at that time, I started getting exposed to all this analytics about the industry. But unlike these executives, I had firsthand experience with customers. So I found that I was able to interpret data a lot more with a lot more understanding of what data was important and what data wasn't. Like, what do you
operationalize it?
Yeah. What do you do with all these analytics? So I started putting that to effect, and I built an internet business that put video stores on the internet through a subscription service. And that's when I met Mark Randolph and Reed Hastings in a trade show where I was demoing my internet.
So they came to your booth?
Yeah, Mark did. Mark came to the booth. He and I have varying different recollections of exactly.
Pray tell. I'll have to go back. For the listeners that are subscribed, they know I've also interviewed Mark. So I'm wondering if these stories match.
Yeah. Well, we shared each of our stories, and he refreshed my memory a little bit. I refreshed his memory a little bit. But I still remember him. So he was asking me. In
spite of what he says, I heard without you saying it.
Exactly. So he came up to my booth. He wasn't interested in what I was selling. He was interested in knowing what I thought about DVDs and was there a future in DVDs? And if this was 1997, July, DVDs had just come out in March of that year. So it was still unclear whether the entertainment industry would adopt DVD as its main format and what the pricing would be and all that. So he knew at the time I was president of the trade association that was putting on this big event, like 15,000 video store retailers attending. So he was interested in asking me all these questions about DVD. And then he started walking away, and he didn't get my name, or I didn't get his name. And where our recollections vary is, well, one, I thought he had a scruffy beard and sandals. He claims he didn't have a scruffy beard and he wasn't wearing sandals. But my recollection is,
where was he living at the time? And then that will be the truth teller.
Scotts Valley, where he still lives, right next to Santa Cruz.
I think you're on. Okay.
Yes. So he started walking away. He had a backpack on, and I remember thinking, wait a minute, I don't even have your contact info. So I grabbed his backpack right around the neck and pulled him back and yanked a little too hard, and he went off balance. And I said, wait a minute, you haven't even given me your name. And I remember him kind of reluctantly going, okay, here's my contact info. And he said, yeah, I'll get in touch with you. And he didn't. So
I'm not convinced the way you just said it. Yeah. Don't call me, I'll call you.
Yeah, right. So a couple of weeks later, I thought, wait a minute, I haven't heard from this guy. He clearly knew a lot. I mean, you could tell he was a really smart guy. So I reached out to him, and we agreed between us in Woodside, California at Buck's Cafe. And that's where, all the conversation, he kept asking me, do you think it could do you think people would rent DVDs over the internet? Do you think people would buy them over the internet? And that's how, we came to work together.
And then how did Reed get involved?
And so Mark worked for Reed at a company called Pure Atria. Mark was the VP of corporate marketing, and Reed was the primary shareholder and president. They had just sold the company to Rational Software, who I think since has been bought by somebody else. And the new owners said, you're all out of a job in September, but go enjoy the summer. We'll pay you through September, just go enjoy it. And Mark was looking for something to do. And this was one of his ideas of a business. Reed said, listen, when you come up with an idea, I'll think about putting money into it. And so Reed invested in the idea of building a DVD internet video store. And that's
whose idea was that? Was that yours? Was it Mark's? Or was it the two of you saying, aha?
It was definitely Mark's idea.
Okay. That's what he says in his book, but you never know.
Yeah. No, it was 100% his idea. Of course, this is not subscription. This is a la carte rentals, a 1 week rental for $4.99 selling DVD.
My family did it. I remember us doing it. Sure.
Yeah. So the business, like all businesses, evolve over time, but the idea of building an internet video store was his idea, and then that went on for. I was there for 5 years. I brought Ted Sarandos to the company when Reed wanted me to move to LA to run content. One of my stupidest decisions in my life was telling him no. I really enjoyed being the head of business development. And I told him I have a really good friend who I think would be amazing at the job. And that was Ted Sarandos, who was my rep from my distributor for my video stores.
Okay, hang on a second though. Why do you say that was one of your dumbest decisions? Why? What was wrong with that decision?
Well, Ted is, I would say, the most powerful person in Hollywood. And
today or back then?
Today.
Okay.
And that was Reed offered me that job and I turned it down.
Because you didn't want to move?
It was not so much that. I was having kind of family issues, but even that wasn't the main thing. I just was very comfortable in my role there as the VP of Business Development. What I was doing is focusing on ways to bring in kind of strategic partners to bring us subscribers. So I did a deal with Best Buy, and I would work. When Mark stopped working with the manufacturers, I took over those partnerships with Sony and big retailers and so on.
Okay, let me, if I may, ask you this question. Right, because we have to remember, I'm a clinical psychologist here. First, and it actually informs all my coaching and consulting. When you said you were having issues at home, family-wise, at that moment in time, is it possible, and maybe you weren't even aware of it, so I know I'm asking a silly question, but is it possible that perhaps ever so slightly for that moment in time put a little scratch in your I'll figure it out?
I think it's
or confidence.
Yeah, I think it's I was in a world with people like Mark, like Reed, like Leslie Kilgore and Patty McCord that were very smart and accomplished, and I was trying to learn fast enough to not, be seen as like not belonging to the group. So I kind of constantly felt under pressure. I put myself in these positions a number of times in life where I'm around people who I probably don't belong.
Oh my goodness, absolutely not. You elevate yourself that way.
That's exactly how I looked at it. I thought I can learn a lot. These people fascinate me. I was just like a sponge, whether it was listening in or reading what they wrote. But at the same time, it was a certain amount of pressure. And once in a while, and that time was one of them, I don't know. I just didn't feel like I could do, I could make it work. My wife and I were arguing a lot, and my kids wanted me to be around more. It just, and then this looked like this huge job. So yeah, I think I'm sure there's 3 or 4 other times where I've just felt like weak, and not able to overcome or feel strong enough that I can overcome the challenges.
Yeah, I feel, I really feel you as you're saying that, like when you said the biggest mistake, like I feel the sadness from you, but if I may offer this, I think we all get to places in life where our cup just runneth over at that moment, right? I mean, I've always worked. I've always worked around, I have a very successful husband. I had four children, right? I'm the mom. And I limited things. I limited travel when my children were younger because we felt somebody had to be home. I can look back on that now and say, boy, where would I have been today? But you know what? That worked for me at the time. And, there's a couple of people I've worked with, and you never want to go back, because if the past just informs your future, and if you go back and change it, well, you wouldn't be who you are today, and you're pretty cool today.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely with you on that. It's and when I say one of my biggest mistakes, I don't fret about it. Although I should say, I have noticed a characteristic that I have that I think many people have, and that is stressing more about what you didn't get rather than being grateful for what you did. And I find myself having to fight that feeling once in a while, where I just go, God, if I had only not sold my Netflix stock, or if I'd only taken that position, or, and there's multiple times, and I go, wait a minute, I should be like thanking God and being grateful for, what I do have. But I do find in weak moments, I find myself having to fight that.
So in fairness to you, Mitch, oh my gosh, there's so much we could talk about here, but I want to focus on you. But in fairness to you, entrepreneurs are notorious for that. And Dan Sullivan, who is arguably the best entrepreneurial coach in the world. He's the owner, founder of Strategic Coach. He wrote a book with Dr. Benjamin Hardy, who's a dear friend of mine who I adore, young guy, brilliant, called The Gap in the Game. And they talk about how if I had it here, I think it's in my closet, I would reach for it. And they talk about how entrepreneurs do exactly what you said. We didn't do this, I didn't do that. If I only did this, as opposed to celebrating your incredible success, right? Yeah. And you're so humble. It's so obvious. So you're at Netflix. All right, Ted takes the position. You didn't take the position. What else? Go forward.
So
by the way, they wouldn't have had you in that room if you didn't have a value add.
Yeah,
right?
no, because I always had confidence. I knew it, at the very least I could fake it for a long enough period of time.
So you learned it, yeah.
Before I learned it. So then, a year after we went public,
this is Netflix.
It's still Netflix.
And now, when did you sell your shares? Because everything I've ever read about you talks about you saying that. So was that before it went public, or?
I sold, so we went public in May of 2002, and by the fall of that year, our stock was cratering. It went from $15 down to $9 a share. And I had set up, in fact, with Mark Randolph's help, a 10B5. It was a program that automatically would sell based on what was going on in the market.
Numbers, yeah.
Yeah, separate, because I was an insider on the executive team. So I had to set that up in advance, 6 months in advance. Yep. And unfortunately, I set it up completely wrong, and it was selling like crazy as it went down. And so I had to so I canceled the program, and then realized the only way I can really manage this is if I'm out of the executive committee. And at the same time, I was doing a project that I thought was going to be one of the best things that ever happened to Netflix. And Reed had me shut it down. And it just devastated me. It was called Netflix Express. It was putting Netflix vending machines.
Back to the vending machines.
Yep, keep going. I'm going to make this thing work if it kills me. And if it
kills me.
And it did. So Netflix vending machines, where you could return your movies there, pick them up, pick up new ones, sign up as a new customer, instead of waiting at the time, the 2-3 days in the mail for your DVDs to come. So I had set up a location in Las Vegas at a Smith's grocery store, and it just took off. It was, signing up thousands of new customers, but what happened is analysts who were looking at monitoring Netflix stock got wind of it and asked Reed one time, so are you going back to the physical world, or should we think about you going forward to the digital world? And he thought that's why the stock was cratering, is that analysts were going, wait a minute, these guys are thinking about investing in physical locations. In other words, these kiosks. So he had me shut it down. It devastated me. I didn't respond in the normal, rational, thoughtful way. I blew up, and
you were hurt. You were hurt.
I was hurt. And a month or two later, Mark left the company. And
because it connected to that?
Well, Mark was my partner in this, but Mark really left. You'd have to ask him exactly why he left.
Oh, okay. No, the way you said it, I thought that you obviously the two of you are very close, and you're both very important to each other. He's been very instrumental in your career, just from what you're telling us today. Yeah,
definitely. I just always admired Mark. Mark is just a brilliant person. He's everything I'm not.
It's a perfect partnership.
It really is.
I work with business partners that kill each other, right? And many times they partner with people that are just like them. That's a prescription for a disaster. So that's a perfect partner.
Exactly. So I remember Reed coming up to me in the year later in 2003 and saying to me that, now that we're a public company, he didn't think that I could survive in that environment. He said, you always like to try things and experiment things and not, kind of go through the process. And he said, we're going to let you go. And I thought, and of course that hurt, but I found it very motivating, because I swore I was going to show him that I could operate in a big corporate world.
You'll figure it out.
And I'll figure it out. And it motivated, and that's why I joined McDonald's and
that's
built that
the reason?
Yeah, that was, so they had this, McDonald's had come to us while I was still at Redbox, I'm at Netflix a few months before, and said, we want to put kiosks in all the McDonald's locations that rent DVDs as a way to build traffic, to build frequency.
Absolutely, sure.
You got to come back.
Get the burger, good to go.
Yeah, you'll come back to return it. You'll smell the burgers and fries. You'll create an incremental purchase. And so I had proposed that, but they wanted someone who knew the video business to run it. So they wanted Netflix to be their partners. And we turned them down because everybody including myself at Netflix were what you'd call McDonald's avoiders. We would never touch that food. We were too much in the health. Exactly. So anyway, so after Reed let me go, he said, but wait a minute, there is something you're really good at, and I want to hire you as a consultant to go to Europe and to go to Japan and explore expanding Netflix in those markets.
Oh, I'm feeling so much better for you now.
Yeah, no, it was very sweet. So anyway, so I did that. And on my way back from England, I stopped by, I contacted these McDonald's guys and stopped by and met them, and met the new guy who was taking over named Greg Kaplan, who has been just one of my total inspirations, like Mark. And he asked me to join as COO of, this 6 kiosk group in Bethesda, Maryland, to try to build this business ultimately Redbox. And I was COO and then president for 8 years. Learned how to operate in a large company. I had
I'll be damned.
Yep. I had 1,800 employees.
Are you listening, Reed?
Yeah. So, and it was just an amazing experience.
Did you love it? Did you love the work?
Totally loved it. When it was understanding what consumers wanted in an entertainment retail experience was in my blood. And I found the most rewarding thing was working with brilliant people and bringing the best out of them. So at Redbox, when we got to around the $300 million a year revenue phase, by that time we had about 15,000 kiosks around the country in grocery stores and Walmart and so on. My VPs were not as enthusiastic. They went from managing 2 or 3 people to now 50 people each, and I was kind of stymied. How do I get people excited? Yeah. They were just kind of doing their job, and I ended up hiring an organizational psychologist out of Chicago who asked me, so how do you treat your team? And I said, I treat them all exactly the same. I give them respect. I offer to help, all this. And he said, but wait a minute, everybody wants something different. This individual wants more respect. Another might want more money. Another one might want more challenges. Said, your job is to find out what motivates them and customize the way you manage them to fit what they want, not what you think is the, more democratic way to manage. And so I started doing that, and I just found, just amazing results. The next year we doubled in revenue to 775 million. And the next year we doubled to $1.5 billion in annual revenue. And these people just, once they got what they wanted, once they had the opportunity to get what they wanted, they just completely changed. And then they did the same thing with their team. And it was really revealing. I had never imagined.
That's so interesting, because it's one of the companies I'm working with now. They're after a tax company and after tax season. I said, well, what do you do for your team now? Well, we're giving Friday off half days. I said, have you asked any of them what they would like?
Right.
And they looked at me. I'm like, go back and ask. They did. The next call we had, they were like, couldn't believe it. Somebody doesn't want Fridays off. Somebody wants Wednesday mornings off, or whatever.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. And, as managers, as leaders, we often are afraid to ask our team for fear of what they might want. And but what you find is, most people are pretty rational. They kind of understand the limits and understand more importantly, they understand what makes them tick. It's
and even if you can't meet their need, and I'm sure you found this, they are so appreciative that you cared enough to ask.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're open.
Right. And even, I can't promise you, but I want to hear in so many words what floats your boat. Right. Yeah. And they will tell you that. I hear that all the time from the coaches. They say, I tried it. It was so simple. I'm like, we're not reinventing the wheel here. This is human motivation, human behavior.
Yeah.
People want to be heard.
Yeah. And, and I was really fortunate to sit for probably 2 years at a small, 4-foot table alongside Patty McCord, who is the head of HR at Netflix. Yep. And what I really, learned from her is just this whole concept of diversity and diversity of thinking, and creating those environments where people felt empowered to talk. And there's so many times where your direct reports won't tell you the real story. They'll color it to make you feel good or to not have to explain things. And one of the things that I started doing, one time there was this young kid, it was his first day on the job, and we were in a meeting and he just blurted out, what he thought was messed up in the way we operated. And nobody else would have done that.
He was too young to know better.
He was too young. And he was 100% right.
Right on the money.
Everything he said. And from that point on, I always would include in meetings someone who was really new to the job, hadn't learned to be politically correct, because it kept the managers on their toes. They knew that, if this guy, if I don't say what's really happening, this guy is going to, or this woman is going to. And, it actually.
What you did with that, which is why I called it the podcast, The Trust Doctor, right? You created trust, right?
Yeah.
If I don't tell you on any level in life, personal, friendship, romantic, work, if I don't tell you something that I know you are obviously doing wrong, offending people, many times people will say, well, I'm not, you'll kill the messenger, or I don't care enough to tell them and risk their wrath. Right. And, that's the history of why so many companies have what appear to be, you wake up in the morning and their stock has crashed, or they're out of business, or somebody's going to jail. It was not new news to the people in the company, but the culture was not trustworthy to speak truth to power. Yeah, absolutely true. There's nothing more important than, at least in my mind, to create that sense of confidence that you could say something and not have repercussions. And it's really, really an important and hard. It's really hard to create that environment, especially when things aren't going really well. When things are going up to the right, it's a lot easier. Sure. Okay, so you just gave me, hopefully we have a couple more minutes. You just gave me the perfect segue into, you're such a nice guy, I almost don't even want to go here, MoviePass. Right? Because I'm just wondering if maybe people were more truthful, everybody, not everyone, right? We're all responsible, right? You have the captain of the ship, but everybody has to be rowing the boat in the same direction. Was that part of what happened there? I don't know. Well, the vision and the business model absolutely could have worked. It is no different from Netflix or Spotify. I mean, Spotify lost $1.4 billion before they started making money. Amazon for 20 years never made money. Do they even make money now? I thought they did. They only do because of AWS, their server business. Right. And had we been given enough time and not been owned by a publicly traded company, I'm convinced we would have made it. The problem is that in this particular case, there was some smart people who were at the movie theater business and at the studios that saw that we were too much of a disruption. And I liken it to this, is that imagine if United Airlines, Hyatt Hotels, Hilton, et cetera, could have kept Expedia and Orbitz from existing. They definitely would have, because I'm sure they tried. Yeah, now you've got a business in between them and their customer. And the mantra for all companies today is to build your brand and to have a direct relationship with your customers so that you can predict and manage and get the best value. And so you're in control. Yeah. And so, the presidents of
several of the theater chains and companies like Fandango and others realized that we were going to be inserting ourselves in between them and their customer and monetizing that, where they should have, they essentially should have, and of course, eventually did launch their own movie clubs and so on. So I think, I entitle I have 2 chapters on MoviePass.
We'll get to this. Don't worry. I'm going to share.
Okay. The second chapter is how I forgot everything I learned at MoviePass. And it really was when things started getting difficult and challenging, I didn't go back to all the things I had learned at Redbox and Netflix about dealing with challenges like competitors who don't want you to succeed, employees that are losing faith. It was almost like I had a brain freeze. And my only explanation that makes me feel slightly better is that all this happened within the space of 12 months. So it was like this meteoric rise and this, disastrous fall. And so,
what does that make you feel? Why does that make you feel better, or consolation prize?
Just because the amount of time was so compressed.
Oh.
When I think about what I should have done, and I think about all the other things going on at that time, it at least makes me feel slightly better. But for me, it was a real example of failure that was embarrassing, sad, and also revealing that I do need to be more thoughtful about the challenges and deal with them a little bit faster than I did at the time. And, it's an awful feeling, but, like you said, you can't revisit the past except for in ways to help you going forward. And it definitely taught me a lot of lessons for the future.
I would love to just keep speaking with you, Mitch, but I know you have other appointments here. But as you know, sometimes you win and sometimes you learn, and there'll be so much. I mean, you are so humble, and I feel badly that you say you are humbled and you feel badly by that failure, because what's that quote about, the person that's in the arena fighting will never criticize the guy that loses. In the arena, it's the person that's sitting on their couch doing diddly, right? So look if you look at your career, and there's a part of me that feels like if you're still in the arena, the best is yet to come for you. Two quick questions. One is, out of all the lessons, all the wisdom that you have, what is the one most important thing you've discovered about life, business, anything that you absolutely want people to know? One.
It's absolutely surround yourself with really smart, passionate, interesting people who are driven to make their dreams come true. That to me is like makes everything worthwhile, whether you succeed or fail, if you have that stimulation of wonderful people around you. That's the key.
I love that. And my last question is, what is the last book you reread and why?
The last book I've read twice, there's 2 of them, but the one is called The Secret Life of the Pronoun. And it's a fascinating little book. It's not a big book, but I went back and reread it because I found it so telling in conversations with people. And the basic theory is the more someone uses a pronoun instead of the real name of the person, the less respect they have for that individual or that thing. And
they create a distance.
Yeah. And it's almost like Warren Buffett's technique he uses to identify executive hires. He takes them to a a little diner in Omaha and watches how they treat the staff.
Sure.
Everybody always treats people higher up better and treats their peers probably better, but how do they treat the people who they might think aren't as good as them or as educated as them? And I found the theory of that book a really great indication of people I might want to work with as I start to get a little bit more thoughtful about who I work with going forward.
That's great. And I suspect that everybody would want to work with you, because I can't imagine you not being polite and respectful to anyone, to an ant on the ground. You're just so compassionate and empathic and humble. And really, it's been such a pleasure. So thank you so much. And for everybody, make sure you read, watch, and learn How I Turned Hollywood Upside Down with Netflix, Redbox, and MoviePass. And when you read this book, and the more you learn about Mitch Lowe, the more you will realize he is such a gift to humanity, and you will come away smarter and kinder because of it. So thank you. And that concludes today's podcast episode of The Trust Doctor, Restoring Trust and Enriching Significant Relationships. And as promised, Mitch Lowe took you for a ride. Make sure you check out his book, and make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe to this podcast. Until next time, be well.
Once again, we've concluded another great episode of The Trust Doctor with Dr. Patty Ann. Tune in next week for more insights and advice on how you can create, nurture, and sustain healthy relationships. To find out more about the podcast, visit drpattyann.com/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, and share. Until next time.